Val Davies, Chief Examiner for GCE English Language and Literature and Principal Examiner for Paper 1, Voices and Speech in Writing. And I'm also Chief Examiner of the entire qualification. In this video, I hope to provide feedback on performance of the two examining components, Paper 1 and Paper 2, from summer 2019. Some key documents for you to be aware of: the mark scheme, the question paper, source booklet and examiner's report are available to download and will be really helpful reference materials as we go through the session. You'll find the links to these in the resources widget. I will certainly be referring to them during this presentation. The last slide has links to the reports. I'll look at some of the key issues presented in both papers and hopefully give you an insight into how an examiner thinks when reading and assessing student responses, and therefore help you to get an insight into how an examiner will read and assess your students' work. I'll be presenting extracts taken from responses of students who did well and explaining how they gained their marks and comparing them to less successful responses, highlighting the reasons that they lost marks. The full scripts and the commentaries are on the Pearson Edexcel website as exemplar scripts for 2019. I will deal with both papers in turn and close with teaching and learning strategies that are common to both. You may want to pause my recording to read the exemplars through. The mark scheme is the key to success with all exam components, and it's really important that you familiarise yourself with how the assessment of objectives relate to the specifics of the task. I urge you to become familiar with the mark scheme because it's the document that examiners apply to every response that they read. Each mark scheme is divided into levels, and the headings of these levels describe the characteristic of each level. So level 1 is descriptive, level 2 is general understanding, level 3 is clear, relevant application, level 4 is discriminating controlled application, and level 5 is critical and evaluative application. Each assessment objective covered by a particular question is allocated a bullet point within each level. So basically, what an examiner does is first decide which level descriptor best describes the response they are reading in order to place that response in a level that best fits the quality of that response. Then they will assess performance against each of the assessment objective descriptors within that level. Some elements will inevitably be more successful than others. So the examiners must then balance out performance to decide which marks within the level to allocate. We always try to reward positively, so a response that fulfills all the descriptors for one level will be considered for an upward movement into the next one. As its title suggests, this component is all about the construction and presentation of voices in speech and writing. The text for Section A have been selected to afford comparative comment on voice and personal identity. The choice of drama text for Section B is hopefully self-explanatory. This paper presents two questions divided into two sections, A and B, and there is equal weighting across those sections with a maximum of 25 marks divided between 5 levels available for each. Section A calls for the comparative analysis of unseen texts, which is linked either thematically or generically with a second text that is taken directly from the Pearson anthology that is a set text for this course. This task is assessed against all 4 AOs and assesses the quality of written expression, the links between form and function, and also contextual and comparative comment. Section B presents an extract from the studied drama text and calls for students to explore the extract through an analytical lens with a focus on the specific requirements prompts of the question, and to use this as a starting point for extension with the same approach and focus across the wider play. As there is no comparative component to this task, it's assessed against AOs 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so now we're going to consider how students responded to question 1 in the 2019 summer series. A reminder that the text presented here were an extract from an article written by Patrick Sawyer, which was published in the online version of The Telegraph shortly after the death of Muhammad Ali, and a review of Anna Whitman's novel Boxer Handsome that was taken from the anthology. A good starting point in terms of preparation for this question is to have studied the anthology text, looking analytically at the language and the specific features of genre that each text contains. We begin by looking at the characteristics of a successful response to question 1. Okay, this overview links directly to the assessment objectives for this component. It incorporates some of the reflections of the 2019 examiner's report. The points here sum up the characteristics of a successful response, and you can read them for yourself. But basically, we're looking for a balanced coverage of both extracts with consistent exemplification to support the comments that are made. It's this evidence, this exemplification, that allows both the identification of features and terms, both linguistic and literary, at AO1, and the linking of these choices and in the intentions of the writers in terms of their effect on the reader, AO2, that is crucial. And that will, if they make the links between form and function, they will hit the requirements for AO1 and 2. Contextual comment, that's AO3, should be relevant to the question rather than bolted on at the end. The introduction for each text in the source booklet often provides a useful place to start on this one. One of the most significant elements of this question is the integration on comparative comments. This is often more successful than a sequential exploration of each text in turn, or a rigid framework based on features that can often be forced or incomplete. But more of that later on. We're going to look at an extract from Level 5 response. These texts are taken from Exemplar 1 in the script pack, and it's a script that was awarded a mark in Level 5. Obviously, the extracts that we're going to look at give a flavour only, but the full script and PE commentary is available in the 2019 exemplar pack on the Pearson Edexcel website. The script used here is script A in that pack. The response offers integrated points of comparison throughout. Here, by way of example, offering links and contrasts to from the very beginning through analytical investigation of the title of each text. A comparative exploration of titles, if it's relevant, is always a sensible place to start. And as discussion can extend beyond the language applied to a generic form and convention that is signalled by this title, thereby hitting multiple AOs. Terms here are applied with accuracy and linked to their function effectively too, hitting AO1 and 2 at the same time. Same script, different extracts. Here, analysis is sound, and examples are judiciously selected to generate clear links between form and function. The examples here apply both literary and linguistic frameworks accurately to evidence the contrasting styles of each text, which link to a secure appreciation of genre and convention. What this response does, and it does it throughout, is integrate all required elements in terms of AO achievement with fluency and with confidence, and that marks it out for success. Here, the insightful exploration of literary device demonstrates a keen understanding of the anthology text and the content in which it was produced and received. The link between boxing and the style of the novelist and the theme of her novel is also clearly made to the contextual and generic form in the text. This student clearly knows the anthology text, and it shows in their response. Okay, so now let's look at the characteristics that mark out a less successful response to question 1. Again, this overview links directly to the AO for this component and incorporates some of the reflections on the 2019 series made in more detail in the Principal Examiner's report. The points here sum up the characteristics of a less successful response and do not necessarily relate to in full to the exemplar script that follows. It's a summary. Less successful responses were those that struggled to integrate comments on context and/or connections with identification of features or terms. They were often more secure with analysis at word level and frequently struggled at sentence level, especially when linking form to function. Exemplification, that key to integration, was often inconsistent, and this restricted the potential for specific and analytical comment. I cannot stress how important exemplification is. Okay, we're going to look at a level 3 response. This script was awarded a mark in the middle of level 3. So there are many positive points to be made about it, as it was judged overall to present the clarity and relevance that is characteristic of this level. Level 3 scripts fall short of the discrimination and control evidence at level 4. And the fact that this script was pushed away from the border to the middle of the level suggests it was not judged to exhibit the more complex and developed characteristics of that upper level. Again, a full script and PE commentary is available in the 2019 exemplar pack on the Pearson Edexcel website. The script used here is script 3 in that pack. There is a clear attempt at comparison. Terms are accurate enough, but comment does not fully extend beyond the labelling to make developed links between form and function. So, although AO1 is at level 3, evidence from this extract suggests that AO2 is more general and therefore reflective of level 3. Take time to compare this with the level 5 scripts we looked at earlier and the developed consideration of this AO2 element in that more successful response, and you will see why there are 2 levels that separate the marks that were awarded to these scripts. Moving on, same script. There are some valid, if essentially rather straightforward, comments on voice and its construction here, which means that the student is addressing the focus of the question and needs to be rewarded accordingly. The approach is linked with some clarity to genre and attendant conventions, but the development of points is again straightforward. The chief issue here, which characterises the response as a whole, is the use of the term exophoric reference as a point of comparison. Because what the student does is struggle to make it work for the second text. And so the comparison, using this frame as its pivot, is forced and ineffective as a result. Point, important point, there is no need to compare and contrast every point throughout the analysis. Be selective. And again, points are valid here and offer some comparative comment. It's an interesting point too, but it's coloured a little by expression, which is a little cloudy. This section would have benefited from further development to exemplify what is a really interesting point of comparison and to afford exploration of technique and effect. But unfortunately, in this instance, this is as far as it goes. There's also limited specific comment on broader context. This is tagged on to the concluding section of the response. Similarly, specific consideration of voice and its construction and presentation is pretty much undeveloped. Moving on to section B of the response. To recap, this section presents an extract from the studied drama text and calls for students to explore that extract through an analytical lens and with focus on the specific prompts of the question, and to use this as a starting point for extension with the same approach and focus across the wider play. As there's no comparative element to this task, it's assessed against AOs 1, 2 and 3. Once again, this overview of what makes a successful response links directly to the assessment objectives for this component. Again, it incorporates some of the reflections of the 2019 series made in more detail in the Principal Examiner's report. The points here sum up the characteristics of a successful response and do not necessarily relate to the full exemplar script that follows. We're looking in successful responses for a detailed exploration of the extract that's presented as a starting point. Remember that that extract has been chosen with the precise wording of the question in mind, so investigation should be thorough, but should only use evidence that links to the task. Selection of appropriate evidence, both in the extract and from the wider play, is a key discriminator for Section B. There are many elements of a successful response that mirror those related to question 1. This isn't a literature exam, so an analytical lens needs to be applied here as well. Consistent exemplification is again the key, as it is this evidence that allows both the identification of features in terms of both linguistic and literary terminology and the linking of these to the choices and intentions of the writer in terms of their effect on the reader. This will meet the requirements for AO1 and AO2. And that approach should not be significantly different from that adopted to question 1. There should be a balance in the exploration of the extract and the exploration of the wider play. Students should attempt to provide specific evidence to support their assertion and to afford analytical comment here too. The quality of contextual comment is also key to the production of a successful response to Section 2. Remember that context also includes consideration of the text as a performance piece, and therefore the dramatic techniques employed by the playwright, especially the idea of character as a device or construct, is crucial. Those responses that integrated or linked the broader contextual points to the evidence they provided within the body of their response scored well. This, in contrast to those that incorporated learned tranches of contextual data, social, historical, political, biographical, without tailoring that data to the specifics of the task. And those did less well at AO3. But again, more of that later on. Okay, here we go. An extract from a level 5 response to All My Sons. This play, along with Streetcar, continues to be very popular with centres. The full script and the PE commentary is again available in the 2019 exemplar pack on the website. The script used here is script B in that pack. It was awarded a mark in level 5, the highest level of achievement, and as such, we would expect some sophistication in the exploration offered. Here, there is a sophisticated sense of character as construct, which affords some useful and integrated contextual comment. There's also confident, fluent expression of this. For example, the connected extracts here show clear awareness of Miller's social political stance and his use of Jim's character to voice some of his opinions. Comments on Sue and her links to the choral function of Greek tragedy reveal a real understanding both of the influences on Miller himself, but also of her structural and dramatic significance to the play as a whole. Here, there are valid points on the social and historical context and they're combined critically and effectively with comments on Miller's technique and his construction and presentation of character. There is fluid integration of all AOs here, even in this small extract. And that integration is expressed with the confidence and concision that marks out this response as a level 5 one. This extract, again, all the AOs are targeted in a fully integrated way. There's sustained appreciation of the text as a performance piece. Here, a thoughtful consideration of stage directions. These contextual points are fluidly integrated with analysis of dialogue and subtle observations on broader context. The response ranges with facility across the play as a whole, again, hitting all AOs in an integrated way. This is just one example, drawn from a script as a whole, that cites Jim and the voice Miller creates for him as a strong, dramatic and contextual device. Terms are applied accurately and links between form and function are expressed with clarity and with assurance. These are only snippets from a full response that totally deserves this placement in level 5. Again, I remind you that the full script and PE commentary is available to download from the 2019 exemplar pack. Okay, now let's look at the characteristics that mark out a less successful response to the questions in section B. A streetcar is one of the most popular texts studied by centres. The extracts used here are taken from a response to Williams's play. Again, this overview links directly to the AO objectives for this component and incorporates some of the reflections on the 2019 series made in more detail in the Principal Examiner's report. Less successful responses to section B sometimes offered little or no specific analysis of technique. This is not a literary exam, and the need to apply a linguistic lens to the investigation of the text is central and encompasses 2 of the 3 AOs. Less successful responses were unbalanced. The need to explore the extract in detail before moving on to discuss the wider play is absolutely essential. Some others paid scant regard to the extract itself, which has been chosen with the question in mind, and similarly restricted opportunities for reward. Many of those responses seem to want to move away really quickly from the focus of the question to a different agenda or question, which may have been rehearsed in preparation for the exam. I guess that's supported by evidence that some were actually answering the question from a previous series. Context was also a clear discriminator. Those that simply bolted on tranches of learned and general contextual material that was not shaped to the specifics of the question did not do well at AO3. There were many missed opportunities to score contextual points through the investigation of dramatic devices and techniques. Treat the play as a performance text and look for evidence of convention. Okay, the following extracts are drawn from a level 2 response to question 3, Streetcar Named Desire. Therefore, we should expect comments to be general in the main, because general characterises a level 2 response. The full script and commentary are available in the 2019 exemplar pack on the web. The script used here is script 10. Here, in this example, there is an attempt to tailor these contextual points to the task, but these are sweeping and general at best. And the reference to Southern America is a little bit shaky. Next extract, there is recognition of the text as a performance piece, which is good. Though the comments offered on the function of stage directions here are a little straightforward and undeveloped. Specific analysis here and elsewhere in the response as a whole is very, very thin, therefore restricting reward at AO1 and AO2. Here, let's focus on the task in the contrast between the sisters here, but it's again very straightforward, very, very general. No specific analysis of evidence is provided, and this is characteristic of the whole response, as you can see if you can download the full script. It's a shame, because the evidence that the candidate is chosen here is apt enough, and it's just not taken far enough. As with many less successful responses, there's a drift away from the specific question to another possibly previous or rehearsed agenda based on the well-worn theme of fantasy versus reality. Okay, on to paper 2. Paper 2 calls on students to apply the skills of close, contextualised, and in response to section B questions, comparative reading, showcasing their knowledge of both literary and linguistic terms and concepts. In other words, to apply many of the skill sets used in paper 1 to a variety of text types. They need to synthesise their learning, integrating language and literature together in order to analyse both short and prose text and their studied literary works. The work in both areas is organised thematically, and students pursue one of the 4 topics: society and the individual, love and loss, encounters, crossing boundaries. And they are expected to demonstrate evidence of wider reading in and exploration of the topic they have studied in their examination answers. In this paper, the questions are weighted differently to question 1, with 20 marks allocated for the investigation of the unseen single prose extract that is presented in section A of the exam, and 30 marks allocated for the comparative investigation of the 2 literary texts they've studied in section B. Time is a frequent issue with this paper. I'd recommend that students split their time sensibly in order to address the more complex and comparative requirements of section B, especially given the additional 10 marks available here. Mark grids and levels into which they're divided and the AO descriptions these contain match those of paper 1. But the main difference between the 2 papers is that the unseen analysis explores 1 text only and is therefore assessed only against AO 1 and 2 and 3, whereas the second component contains the comparative element and is assessed against AO 1 to 4. In the series, as in previous years, the theme of society and the individual was by far the most popular option chosen by centres for study. This meant that responses to question 1 and the investigation of the Mary Somerset Webb text predominated, as did responses in section B to question 5, with The Great Gatsby as the most popular anchor text, and the most popular second text linked to this theme were Othello, The Whitsun Weddings, and Great Expectations. Okay, now we're going to look at how students responded to section A in the 2019 summer series. And we're going to start with a successful response. As before, this overview links directly to the AOs for this component. And again, this overview links directly to the AO objectives for this component and incorporates some of the reflections on the 2019 series made in more detail in the Principal Examiner's report. The points of this slide sum up the characteristics of a successful response and don't necessarily relate in full to the exemplar script that follows. We're looking for a detailed exploration of the given extract with clear focus on the specific requirements of the task. Exactly as in paper 1, there should be consistent exemplification to support comments and assertions, and exactly as in question 1, it is this, as in paper 1, it's that evidence that allows both the identification of features and terms, both linguistic and literary, and the linking of these to the choices and intentions of the writer in terms of the requirements on the reader. If they do that, they will hit AO1 and AO2. The most successful answers discuss the implications of specific lexical and syntactical choices in the context of the entire passage. They were able to move beyond feature spotting and to explore shifts in register, as well as generic conventions and deviations from these conventions. Successful responses approached the text as a coherent whole and were able to discuss it as a complete piece of writing rather than a series of techniques to be identified or features to be spotted. This is much more successful than the rather limiting approach of working chronologically through the extract. The principal examiner this year commented that if the student is pressed for time, that the final paragraphs of the extract can be neglected. And this year, this proved costly, especially with regards to the extract for Society and the Individual and Love and Loss, in which vital clues to the overall mood and tone of the pieces were introduced in the concluding paragraphs. So some key advice here is to read the whole extract before you start. The use of supporting relevant contextual material also had a significant effect on achievement, proving to be something of a discriminator this year. Successful responses are expected to demonstrate awareness of any contextual forces exerting pressure on the writing and also show clear understanding of contextual influences on production and reception of the text. They should also be able to make informed comments on the generic form of the text and any attendant structures, features, and conventions. On to a level 5 response. These extracts are taken from a script that was awarded mark level 5. Obviously, these are extracts only and give a flavour only, but the full script and PE commentary is available for download in the 2019 exemplar pack on the website. As the theme of Society and the Individual was by far the most popular with centres, this exemplar is extracted from a response to question 1. And the script here is script 1 in the exemplar pack. As you can see, there's an assured sense of generic form and convention, and it's integrated with comments on the writer-audience relationship. Evidence is selected with a keen eye on the task and is investigated using effective analysis and attendant terminology, with clear links between form and function. Even looking at this extract, you can see that it's hitting all of the assessment objectives. Moving on, there are some subtle comments on the development of the writer-reader relationship here, which demonstrates clear awareness of authorial crafting and intent. Evidence in support of assertion is completely appropriate. This evidence is investigated effectively with accurate application of terminology. Links to form and function are made effectively and again with a clear eye on writer-reader relationship and the overall function of the text. The student sees the text and its structure in its entirety rather than a series of unrelated paragraphs, something that the principal examiner sees as indicating a higher level response. Contextual comment is integrated fluidly and with relevance to the task. This response offers investigation of literary and linguistic device in good and equal measure. Here the student looks at the construction and effect of the metaphor with a clear eye on authorial crafting and intent. It's clear. So let's look at a less successful response to section A. For ease of comparison, I'll also present a second response to question 1. Again, this is the overview of the characteristics of a less respectful response, and it incorporates some of the reflections from the 2019 series made by the principal examiner in his report. The points here sum up the characteristics of a less successful response and don't necessarily relate in full to the script that follows. It's a summative comment on the whole series. There was, as in 2017 and 2018, some evidence of students using the rather limited approach of working chronologically through the extract, sometimes paragraphing their own work in accordance with the structure of the passage and offering an exploration of content. While many lower and mid-level students are able to detect a fair range of linguistic and literary features and offer mostly accurate definitions of terminology, there was not always evidence of an ability to articulate the effect of those techniques, so crucial for success at AO2. Senior examiners commented on the significant number of answers that resorted to feature spotting, which offered little link between form and function. Contextual points tended to be general and not fully developed or connected to the specifics of the task. These extracts to question 1 are drawn from a level 3 response, but the final mark awarded, which was 9, places it at the very bottom of that level. This suggests that the response also demonstrates the general understanding that characterises level 2, with some, but not consistent, evidence of the clear and relevant understanding of level 3. Full script and PE commentary can be found in the 2019 exemplar pack, and this particular script is script 4 in that pack. Comments on purpose are generally fine, although there's some confusion about genre. There are autobiographical elements here, but it's not an autobiography. So do advise all students to read the contextual information in the source booklet carefully. It will give them a guide on generic form. Comments on the purpose and effect of the choices here are relevant enough, but essentially straightforward. But lack of precision and accuracy in terms of analysis and the application of terms inevitably impact on the potential for reward. These errors are evidenced across the response as a whole, and I remind you again that the full script and PE commentary is available for download. Moments of clarity such as this actually secure its placement into level 3. There's a clear appreciation of the metaphor here and of the literary devices from which it is formed. But these moments are infrequent across the whole response, and it's that lack of consistency which anchor the response at the lower end of the level. On to section B, and the comparative analysis of 2 studied texts. Again, the overview outlines what an examiner looks for in a successful response to section B. Again, it links directly to the AO objectives for this component and incorporates some of the reflections from the 2019 examiner's report. These points here sum up the characteristics of a less successful response, and again, the disclaimer that they are not necessarily evident in full in the exemplar script that follows. As this component involves comparison, it's assessed against all 4 assessment objectives. I can't stress strongly enough, as I did when looking at paper 1, that this is not a literature examination. So an analytical lens needs to be applied to the investigation of the literary texts as well. Consistent exemplification is again the key, as it's that evidence that allows both the identification of features and terms, both linguistic and literary, and the linking of these to the choices and intentions of the writer in terms of their effect on the reader. This will meet requirements for AO1 and AO2. Contextual and comparative comment that was integrated into the body of the response and linked to the specifics of the task marked out a successful B response. Teachers need to ensure that students have a wide variety of contextual materials at their disposal and encourage them to use only those which assist in answering the specific question that is asked. This question prompts consideration of the effectiveness of the methods used by the writers of the 2 studied texts to present encounters that influence them. These extracts are drawn from a response to question 7. The full script and commentary are again available from the website. The script used here is script 6 in that pack. There is clear focus on the question and a clear sense of the relevance of both texts from the very beginning. The ground is already laid for the comparative framework that is integral to the response as a whole. It sets out its stall from the very, very beginning and keeps to it. The structural device of primitive versus grand settings is applied successfully to afford comparative comment and focus. The textual references are chosen with real care to support comments on the primitive settings at the lake. The language from which this evidence is comprised is explored analytically to evidence authorial purpose and intent. Contextual comment here is integrated fluidly and with a keen eye on the specifics of the task. Moving on to Carter, the story The Werewolf and the evidence selected from it is appropriate and demonstrates understanding of Carter's collection as a whole, both here and in the second story chosen later. It affords clear points of comparison with the lake scene selected from the Forster novel. Once again, contextual and comparative points are integrated fluidly and linked to the evidence provided. Analysis is accurate and hits AO1 and AO2 with precision. The system that this candidate is set up works very, very well. The movement to extravagant settings here is well sequenced and structured. There's some subtle comment on context here, and the extract presents the overall sophistication that characterises the overall response. Likewise, the analysis is sound and applied with discrimination to the evidence provided to support assertion. This is matched later in the response by an equally judicious selection of evidence to support assertions in the Carter collection, which affords systematic comparison between the two texts on the basis of these settings. Don't take my word for it. Download the full script and the PE commentary on it. On to a less successful Section B response. Again, it's linked directly to the AO objectives and it reflects the summative comments on the series made by the principal examiner in his report. I know I repeat myself, but it's such an important point. This isn't a literature exam. Both sections must be investigated through the analytical lens that's central to the qualification. Students should also be advised to remember the importance of form. For example, not many of the responses on Larkin were truly exploring the importance of the poet's craft and the poetic structures and devices he applies, instead focusing on the narrative nature of the individual poems. Equally, the understanding of the dramatic qualities of the play script was also a determining factor of higher level and higher quality responses, particularly students who could posit the commentary of their play into the society for which it was originally written. The contextual material that was produced was once again somewhat imbalanced in these lower responses. However, in mid to lower levels of achievement, context, textual reduction, socio-historical details, intertextual relationship, staging, publishing, history, blah, 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 etc., were more often deployed than context of reception, reviews, criticism, etc. A blend of both tends to produce the richest answers. Comparative work in less successful responses was highly variable. Many examiners again remarked on their sense that AO4, that's the comparative AO, was the least impressive of the assessment objectives for this unit. As one senior examiner put it, centres should caution students about the use of terms such as similarly or contrast, unless the rest of the paragraph genuinely develops this. Markers are also reminded to be on alert for spurious connections. There is no reward for hollow comparison or contrast. It's a discriminating AO and it needs to be considered carefully. These extracts are drawn from a level 3 response, and the full script is available in the 219 exemplar pack. The script here is script 9 in the pack. It uses a framework of comparison that's effective, but only effective up to a point, and which keeps some focus on the task. It's very worthy, as it forces investigation of this onto the framework. Unfortunately, this approach is often results in a forced comparison. Here, the discussion of an Arundel tomb results instead to the simple and highly disputable notion that the couple are projecting a false identity, so the links are not natural. Here, in this extract, there's some confusion about generic form. And as I said in the overview, there's very little acknowledgement of Larkin's poetic technique. Rather, it's retelling the narrative in those poems. The response moves on to another perfectly valid point of comparison. The evidence here is apt, and there is some analysis, but comments linking form to function are straightforward. So although it hits AO1, it fails to score well at AO2. The two need to be synthesized together. Okay, so that concludes the feedback on the summer examination series. Remember that full versions of the materials referenced here are available to download. In conclusion, remember that there are some approaches that are common to both paper 1 and paper 2, and you can maximize these connections in the teaching of these units. Number 1, and oft repeated in this presentation, is that an analytical lens must be applied to both papers. This is not a literary exam, and both AO1 and AO2 are key mark scheme descriptors in all questions. Look at language choices analytically. Students must be able to apply a language and literature frameworks to both sections of each exam and be able to deploy appropriate and relevant concepts and terminology from both linguistic and literary study to further the analysis. Always provide evidence selected from the text to support the points made. Explore the language from this evidence, from which this evidence is comprised, applying terms in as full a range as possible. Be discriminating in your use of contextual data. Only material that is relevant to the task should be included. Even better, integrate it with exploration of the evidence you provide and analyse. Integrate comparative comments in a similar way. Don't force comparison. The application of a rigid framework often results in forced feature matching exercise. Apply discrimination. Every aspect of every text does not have to be compared. That's it. I hope it's been useful. Thank you for listening.